Hey, are you listening to this episode because you love old school NWA and WCW? Well, if you haven't already, you've got to go check out Starcast.com because Starcast 4 is coming to Baltimore. That's right, Horsemen country. And we're bringing hell with us, man. We've got old school. How about Sting in the red, white, and blue for the first time in decades? Of course, he beat Ric Flair for the world title back at Great American Bash 1990. And he was wearing that famous red, white, and blue jacket that they've made action figures of. Of course, you remember he had the stars and stripe face paint. He's breaking it out for the first time ever for a photo op. And he'll even have the original world title that he won that night from Ric Flair. You can only get this photo op at Starcast. And of course, our main man, Arn Anderson, will be there. Lots of other Hall of Famers too, like Ron Simmons, Ricky Steamboat, Lex Luger, on and on. But lots of fun gimmicks from that early era too. Guys like Johnny B. Bad, even Van Hammer. And how about the Ding Dongs? That's right, the Ding Dongs. What about RoboCop? There's so much fun stuff planned for Starcast. You don't want to miss out. Be a part of it. Join us in Baltimore. Starcast.com. That's STARRCAST.com. Starcast.com. Man, it's like fantasy camp for wrestling fans. Check it out. Starcast.com. It's next month, November 7th through the 10th. And most of the action's going down that Friday and Saturday. Friday will be loaded with old school and some AEW talent. And Saturday, man, it's all about tradition and paying homage to Baltimore as one of the great wrestling cities for the NWA and World Championship Wrestling. Check it out, Starcast.com. You'll be glad you did. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Arn right here on Westwood One. And we have with us today, of course, the founder of the Four Horsemen, the enforcer himself, Double A, Arn Anderson. Arn, how are you, man?
Well, I'm a little bit worn out from all the emotion of last week. You know, there was some pretty soul-searching moments on the show last week, so I'm recovering for that. And besides that, I feel great.
Well, we got great feedback last week. If you missed Arn's retirement episode 3 here on the show, I highly recommend it. I was told many, many times last week that it is, in fact, the best podcast I've ever been on. So thanks for making one of the best episodes ever last week, dude.
Well, I'm honored to have been a part of that with you. That's a pretty profound statement coming from the listening audience. Thank you to them for listening, and thanks for the kind comments.
Well, let's get to the heart of the matter today. We're going to be talking about Fall Brawl 1995 and what a big day that was in your career when you finally got to square off against your best friend and the other sort of building block of the Four Horsemen, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. But before we talk about the match, let's sort of go back to the beginning. We've touched on this just a couple of weeks ago about how you first met Rick and when you knew that he was a friend for you, when he made sure that you were okay at the hospital and took care of your stuff. Talk to me a little bit about, what your relationship had been like with some rather broad strokes from that day up until 1995 with Rick.
Well, we became best friends. When I first came to Charlotte, the first week that I was in town, I stayed at Rick's house. And while I was looking for an apartment and trying to, get acquainted with the boys and all that and find out where the boys lived and what was the best place and all those things, I stayed there, which is for Ric Flair to have you at his house for weeks, for me was tremendous honor. But I was walking around on eggshells for a week. It just kind of built from there. Rick and I became best friends, and it was through day after day after day on the road together, and we had similar interests. And he liked to work out, I liked to work out, obviously, and he liked to have a few beers after the workout, and I liked to have a few beers after the workout. So, our interests were similar. He kind of took me under his wing and was grooming me, and I was wanting to learn. I took in everything he said and everything that he shared with me, and it was just such a learning experience. It was mind-blowing to be hanging out with Ric Flair, to be honest with you. I mean, I was a fan. I was a mark. I was all those things. Super fan. And all the things he had accomplished in the business, who he was, his work rate, you name it. It was right there, and I was getting to share it firsthand. Not many people can say that, and it was awesome.
So fair to say you guys were traveling partners as well. I mean, we've talked about how a lot of the Horsemen were riding on Crockett's jet, but when you're, between towns, you guys are still loading up the car together as well?
Yeah, I mean, the private planes with Crockett didn't come at the very beginning. We had to get the company on fire to be able to afford those. So we were driving everywhere out of Charlotte, and we would ride together when it accommodated us. Sometimes JJ would go on his own. Sometimes Tully and JJ would go together. Rick and I would usually go together, and because I went there to the end, I wanted to watch his matches and learn all I possibly could. Of course, he had a pretty nice ride all the time. It was some form of a Mercedes.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, sort of your role in the Horsemen here, because it does feel like all the other players are interchangeable, and I'm sure we're going to do lots of Horseman content in the future, but, whether it's Ole Anderson or it's Barry Windham or it's Tully Blanchard, the players always sort of changed, and then, of course, in later years, we would see Mongo and Dean Malenko and Chris Benoit and Brian Pillman and lots of iterations of the Horsemen. The two constants were always yourself and Ric Flair, and for better or worse, a lot of people viewed you as sort of his right-hand man. You were definitely the background figure of the duo. Did that ever cause any sort of rift or resentment or on your end, or were you always thrilled to be in the role?
Well, if the truth was known, it was probably more the adjectives used were second fiddle, stooge, some of those type words, I'm sure. I was thrilled to be in that position. A lot of guys had relationships. The Road Warriors were a team, and the Steiner brothers and all these guys that were very, very close in the business. Rick and I were close in the business, and we were the constants, in all those versions of the Horsemen, and during the Jim Crockett days, you got to put Tully and JJ in there as well. That last player from Ole to Luger to all those guys, they all, did a good job in the time they were in the Horsemen, or when it was time for us to make a change. It was always for business purposes. It was never personal. Ole, the only thing personal about Ole is his kid was wrestling in college and he wanted to be there and see him wrestle. And I don't blame him a bit, and as you get older and you get wiser and your kids grow up, if you have boys, you want to see them compete in sports. And it just didn't fit with the schedule we had because, man, we were plowing ahead every single day, and there just wasn't time to take 6 weeks off and go watch your kid wrestle amateur. As much as I agree with it now, at the time it was like, that's going to throw a dent in what we're doing. We all felt that way.
It's fascinating to me that, one of the oldest stories in the book, and we've talked about this on an episode before, is to break up all these duos and have them feud with each other, even if they are, blood brothers, like the Steiner brothers or whatever. Eventually, everybody breaks up, and that doesn't happen during really the top years of Crockett. And, of course, you and Tully are out of there in 88. But do you remember it ever being discussed before 1995 that you and Rick were going to be at odds?
No. I don't think anybody would have thought that was the thing to do. I mean, there were some things, even though you broke, the Steiner brothers up and, during the course of the last 20 years, you broke up the Road Warriors. You had the Road Warriors turn on Dusty. You had the Hardy brothers break up. There were so many incarnations of guys that got broke up over the years, and you put them in an angle, put them in a match. And I've never seen, my experience is the audience buying it or believing it. And I think Rick and I fit in that category. They would much rather see us together than see us apart. And to be honest with you, I had my role. He had his role. albeit we weren't on 50-50 footing with each other. I wasn't the personality that Ric Flair was, for God's sakes. I wasn't the performer he was. I wasn't the icon. You know, Ric Flair, you go through Horseman country, which is the southeastern part of the United States. I mean, he's a god. Doesn't matter what he's doing on TV. Everybody loves Ric Flair. Not to say it's not that way worldwide, but there was never a reason that was so pressing that all of a sudden somebody looked up and went, you know, hey, there's some serious money being left on the table right here if we break up Arn and Rick. It just kind of, over time, that was one of the things that was left that we hadn't done, which made it new, made it fresh, and I'm sure everyone felt like we could pull it off.
Along the way, you guys did, tag quite a bit. I remember there being even some pay-per-views where you and Rick formed a tag team. Was there ever a consideration to, because there were times when, for whatever reason, the office wanted to try something different. We'll put the belt on Sting, or, we'll try it with this guy or that guy. Was there ever consideration of making you guys tag champs, or really packaging you with an extended tag run that you know of?
No, nothing that I knew of. I would have voted for no. Now we could have been fighting with the current tag champions, whether it be Austin and Pillman or whoever that may be, and enhanced those guys in that role, them as champions. But I think Ric Flair as one half of the World Tag Team Champions is a step down. And I don't mean that with any disrespect, because I revere the tag titles. I think a tag match, if done properly with the proper four guys, should steal the show every night. Nothing should be able to follow it. That's my opinion. But I think putting that role on Ric Flair, one half of the World Tag Team Champions, as many times as he's been the world champion, it would be a step down.
Well, let's talk about, as you guys are sort of bouncing around, because, there's a time when you go to the WWF with Tully and you come back, and it's not too terribly long, and he's fed up, and he's going to go to the WWF. How much does your routine change, and how does that affect your friendship when, you're north and he's south, and vice versa?
Well, I mean, it was everybody in this business has to do what they have to do. It's like when Tully and I left, friendships are great. Brotherhood is even better, but business is number one, and taking care of your family is number one. And he felt like he needed to make that move at that time. Hindsight being 2020, it was probably a little late. Would have had more impact if he would have went when we went, but Rick, has to make his own decisions just like we did. And him leaving certainly left me on my own. And I think it provided me with the opportunity for growth and expansion and getting to team with some incredible partners, Bobby Eaton, Larry Zbyszko. It just, we never looked at it as a negative. The move that he made, was just a lateral move, and then we went on our own. No big deal.
At the time, you guys were both living in North Carolina. Is that right?
And still, yes, sir. Absolutely. We sure were. And we would see, when Rick would come home for his couple of days off, which in those days you only got about 6 days off a month, we would see each other. The friendship stayed strong throughout all that.
Talk to us a little bit about, the similarities between, Rick's kids' ages and your kids' ages, because I think you've mentioned before that there's a couple that are fairly close in age, right?
Charlotte and my oldest son, Barrett, are the same age, and they grew up from just little ones, from toddlers, all the way up to probably 15, 16, 17 years old. They were best friends.
And my at the time, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, and my youngest son, who's 11 years younger, came along afterwards, and he kind of missed the biggest part of my career. So he wouldn't have been that privy to that, and I found that strange that that he's the big wrestling fan, and he's the one that possibly is looking looking to go in to being a wrestler, which horrifies me to even mouth the words. But when he graduates college, which is coming up in the next few months, that's his ambition. So I'll help him see it through as long as that's what he really wants to do.
Well, you're breaking news. A lot of people didn't know that. Now they're going to be talking about it. Hypothetically, as we sort of sidebar the conversation, what advice would you give your son getting into the wrestling business?
Be absolutely positive that that's what he wants to do. Be a student, learn everything you can, be respectful of everybody that's came before you and that is here currently and those that will come into the business in the future. Learn your craft, become the best you could possibly be, stay in the gym, do the best you can. God bless him. He's got lousy genetics. He's like his old man. He's not a body guy. But, he's a big, strong kid, and he's a good athlete. And the best thing about him is he's a good, honest person. He's a very respectful person, and he's got a great work ethic. So between all that advice, if he can sort through that and just become a good, better person, good employee, and a student of the business would be the best advice I can give him.
Do you have an idea of how you might get him trained if that's something he wants to pursue?
No, I'm going to start at ground zero. I'm going to take him, to the ring the first time myself, and I'm going to, you'll find out right away. I know I did. If you want to be in this business, if you really truly want to be a wrestler, because it's hard, and that ring is hard. And the first time you get slammed or suplexed or knocked on your can, when you set up, you have a revelation, and you either decide, oh, shit, that hurt, and I'd rather just use my degree that I just got in college and get a job, or you go, ah, shit, that hurt, but you know what? It'll probably be easier the next time I do it, or the next time I do it. And at that crossroads of time, you figure out whether you really want to do this. And if he doesn't, that's great. We had a deal. Get your college degree so you can make a living no matter what. And then we'll talk about it. And he's still got a few months left. So when that's done, we'll talk about it.
Well, let's talk about 1995. After some time apart on screen, you and Rick start to team up again. And you guys start a feud with Vader. And I think most of our listeners remember the legendary match from Starcade 93 in Charlotte where Rick and Vader would have one of the all-time great matches. And it almost didn't happen. But Sid Vicious is no longer here. That's a story for another time. Rick gets the nod, and history is made. And they have a rematch at Super Brawl a few months later, and Rick would win again. But now in 95, Rick and Vader are on the same side. They're forming an alliance against Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. Of course, eventually Rick and Vader's partnership falls apart. And now he brings Arn Anderson into the fold. So there's going to be some interesting matches that we're going to talk about here with even a handicap match with you and Rick on one side and Vader on the other. But before we talk about those matches, Vader definitely had a different approach to the business than you did. What can you tell us about Vader the performer and Leon White the man behind the character?
Well, Leon White, the person, was a big teddy bear. Leon used to come down to Bobby Eaton's room and mine after we would do center stage taping. He'd come down there and would have a couple beers and shoot the shit. He was just a big teddy bear. Now, Vader, the performer, he liked it stiff. He brought it stiff. He was a former NFL player. And he broke in stiff. And when you're fighting Stan Hansen all the time, that becomes like a self-preservation thing, I think. Leon was a big, solid, rugged athlete that could do some incredible stuff. Him doing that Vader bomb out of the corner for a guy that size, he had to be over 400 pounds. Incredible performer. but he would get in there with a guy that was just there to enhance him, and he would get a little rough. And the one beef on him was, he would pick on guys a little bit. The regular guys, I never had a problem with him. And when he was with Harley, they were a phenomenal team. Harley's influence was great for Leon. So it just depends on what position you were in with Leon to how you would view him as far as a history lesson.
You guys never had a problem, though, what you and Rick and Vader, as far as you remember, even Rick's relationship with Vader was pretty good.
Yeah, I think so. If he worked with Leon 2 shows in a row and if Flair went over, then I'm sure by the time he really pissed him off after the Hogan Savage deal, now he's pissed Leon off, and now he wants to bring me into the damn thing, which as usual. So now I'm going to get my head knocked off by Leon because the complexion of the angle changed.
Yeah, so let's talk about, how this idea comes together. Of course, the match we keep talking around is Clash of the Champions, August 6, 1995. Unbelievably, it's a handicap match, and Vader still wins. And after the match, you and Rick start to argue. Rick tries to leave, but you pull him back in the ring by his hair, and that gets the crowd's attention in a major way, and you guys start arguing, and the problems escalate from there. When do you first remember hearing the idea that, hey, there may be an angle for Rick and I to work against each other?
I have a feeling that was already in the works because 2 things happened that night. Number one, I spine busted Vader, which you should have heard the gasp on that, which he took beautifully. And that was the first time I'd put my hands on Ric Flair in that fashion and been disrespectful like that. And that got another gasp. I think it had went to a level never seen before, and I think your casual fan looked at that and went, hey, wait a minute. They hadn't done this before, and so something must be brewing.
It is brewing. The days and weeks leading up to Fall Brawl, we would see, lots of television and lots of promos sort of explaining that there was an issue. And I think it's the first time we ever saw your wife, Mrs. Anderson, on TV. Tell us how that came to be.
Well, it's something you never did. You never wanted to bring your family into the business. It's because, again, where's the payoff? You're not going to work towards a match with guy's wife. You're not going to bring her into the fold. In those days, you didn't. You didn't bring her into the fold and all that stuff. And children, they were kind of, it was a sacred thing. You kind of kept them in the background, and people knew you had a family, but it was off limits. I think at this point in time, and I remember a couple of episodes of television, one where Rick had the figure 4 on somebody, and as we had done 1,000 times, the referee was facing the other way, and he reached back, and I grabbed his hands from the floor, and there would be some leverage. I remember at this point in time, I was trying to wake Rick up, and if teaching him a lesson is the proper terminology, I don't know. But I refused to grab his hands, and he came up to his feet, and we got into a little bit of an argument there, and that was another piece of the puzzle. But my wife, Erin, basically just hammered the nail that Rick and I were close. If we were having issues, I'm sure that we'd work it out. I don't remember exactly what the comment of her promo was. But I came home and I called a camera crew in my house, and that was off limits, and things got a little rowdy, and some people got thrown out, and it was one of those things that added some reality. I hope it did at the particular time that 2 friends, it would be like we're butting heads, and somebody wanted to step in. It would be like 2 brothers at a family dinner, and they get into it, and the dad has to step in and separate them. it was that type scenario with Aaron, I believe, and was different. It was different for that time, and I think she did a good job with it. It helped give us another piece that made this a personal issue, and personal issues have always drawn in this business because people can sink their teeth into a soap opera, and that was soap opera-esque.
No doubt about it. Do you remember who would have pushed for Aaron to be a part of it? Was that a Kevin Sullivan idea or a Ric Flair idea or Eric Bischoff idea, or do you recall?
I do not.
I put my hand out twice. You're the enforcer. Where were you? You're talking about when you turned and looked at me again. What was I thinking about? Again? What does again mean? What does again mean? It seems like lately you're always looking back at me for something or the other.
What he's saying, Ric Flair, he's got a good point there.
Oh, you're a translator now?
Well, no,
Is
but
that
I mean,
what you get paid to do? What I think I'm interpreting you to say is that I'm not qualified, possibly, to be doing that by myself without you there after all these years of being the enforcer. Is that what maybe you're implying? Not implying anything. All I'm telling you is I want to see Ric Flair the killer, not Ric Flair that carries this punk kid for 15 minutes. I want to see the Ric Flair that gets my attention.
Ric Flair, you certainly have got to address that.
Oh, I most certainly do, since you said it on national television. I got to address it in a way you're not going to like. Maybe what you and I should do, for lack of a better word, is go backstairs here and out our personal differences, or since you implied that maybe I wasn't qualified to be out there by myself, maybe you would like me to give you a wrestling lesson. Let me just hammer the nail. Can I hammer the nail? At Slamboree, I beat that punk in record time. I don't think you're man enough to give me any kind of lesson.
Wait a minute. What has happened? How has this relationship fallen out of bed so quick?
Apparently, he's taking a taxi home because he ain't riding in the limo.
Was there any hesitation, to involving her? I mean, it is one of the, rare moments that we ever saw Aaron on anything like this. And I think Macho Man once said, I did an angle with my wife once, now I ain't got no wife, or something to that effect. And you seem to subscribe to that, keep your family away, but there is an exception made here. Any hesitation, or did you feel like this was different and this could still be workable?
I had full control over it. Once the crew got to my house and the whole thing, we're putting it together, I was given creative control over it, so I knew it was going to be done right. I knew it wasn't going to be over the top. Everything would be in good taste, hopefully somewhat credible, and had no problem with it. This one time and one time only.
It's pretty topical, to be talking about a husband and wife, doing some business on screen, because right or wrong, there's been a lot of criticism of the angle on TV that's happening right now with Rusev, Lana, and Bobby Lashley. Have you kept up with any of that?
Not really, but I'm aware of what's been going on, and we'll just have to see how that shakes out. They're kind of, in my opinion, they went for shock value, and now they're going to tell the story afterwards. Who am I to judge? If Rusev is happy with the angle and his wife is happy and Bobby's happy with the angle, then I'm happy for them. All good people. But it just kind of came out of left field, came out of nowhere. I've read enough about to know.
Let's pretend it's 1995 and you're handed a script that sort of plays out the Rusev, Lana, Bobby Lashley piece, except Aaron in the Lana spot, Arn in the Rusev spot, and Flair in the Bobby Lashley spot. What happens to that script when you get it?
Next.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
What else you got?
Yeah, it's a weird piece of business because, you know, the history of angles like this in wrestling and then what happens behind the scenes is not always awesome. So good luck to them. As you said, all great performers, all good people. It's not like it was any of their ideas. They're doing their best with it. Sort of is what it is.
Yeah, I would have think, you know, if something like that goes down back in the day or whatever, to make it swallowable, and I know that's not a word, able to be swallowed, there'd be a hell of a fight going on in somebody's driveway at somebody's house or at the airport or outside the arena or something. It would take a whole different twist if something like that went down. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't begin and end there. That would be my input into it. If you're going to go that far with something, you know, ending up in the sack with another man's wife, if that ain't fighting words, I mean, you're not going to be caught the next week at Cracker Barrel eating together and decide we just put a comma in the angle, you know. Sounds like a serious deal to me.
Yeah, without question. All right, Arn, we need to take a timeout right now. And, of course, we're talking about the two founding members of the Horsemen. And, man, if there's anything the Horsemen knew about in the 80s, it's probably erections. But you're still an expert these days, thanks to BlueChew.com. Tell everybody how you've given your gimmick the hot tag, Arn.
Well, let's be clear about one thing. Flair was more about erections than me, okay? That was not my sole reason for being alive, okay? And just how prominent was it? You know, that's another story for another day. But here's the deal. Now, I'm a problem solver. We've established that, right?
Yes, sir.
There are reasons to use BlueChew in my mind. This is like a topic, okay? So I'm going to solve a problem for you here. There's some of us that as we get a little older, we're not as conscientious or as smart or shit, or we're either just eat up with the dumbass because we get up in the middle of the night and they go to the bathroom, but we fail to cut on the light or raise the toilet seat. So you just end up peeing everywhere but the toilet. Now, the next morning, as you can imagine, as the wife gets out and comes in and sees this, she is flipped. She is irate. Heaven forbid you have the answer. But, honey, look, I took a BlueChew. My gimmick was pointing skyward. It's a physics thing. Sorry.
Reverse the age, reverse the physics. Go to BlueChew.com right now. They're going to hook you up with an online physician, so you get to skip the in-person doctor visit. They're going to help you find the right dosage and the right active ingredient for the world's first chewable that works just like Viagra and Cialis. It has the same active ingredient, but because it's chewable, it can work faster. Take it on a full or empty stomach. And because you skip the in-person doctor visit, it's cheaper. And you can even, avoid the awkward conversation. It'll be shipped to you very discreetly. And how about this? Just because you listen to this show, you can get your first shipment for free. Just go to BlueChew.com and use our promo code ARN, that's ARN, and all you've got to do is pay $5 shipping. Your first shipment is free. Take our word for it. You're going to love it. Blue Chew is the talk of the wrestling business. It's not just for guys who have a problem. It's for guys who want to, enhance their performance. Get your dick on the gas. Go to BlueChew.com. Use that promo code ARN. You'll be glad you did. Well, let's talk about Fall Brawl 95 a little more. You know, the issue's getting heated up. We see the promo from Aaron and her appearance. That does add a layer of realism. And as we get closer, you've probably started to sink your teeth into this a little bit since you had creative control. But this is an angle that once upon a time, you admit you didn't think anybody would buy. As we head towards the pay-per-view, are you feeling better about it? Like, hey, maybe we have something here. We did a good job with this. Or are you still thinking, I don't know if people buy this?
I think everything that we're doing and we're allowed to do and the support we're getting from the company, they're letting us put all the pieces that we want to put in place. In the back of my head, I'm just still not, there's not that rumbling and people choosing a side and, clearly nothing was drawn in the sand to where you've got Rick fans and you've got Arn fans. You've got most people who I think believed Arn Anderson's over his head. Ric Flair's the world champion. Ric Flair's the man, one of the greatest performers in the history of the business, one of the greatest wrestlers. He's a god. He's been world champion how many times? And here's his sidekick. There's not much of a contest here. But each week I was able to get away with something. And without serious repercussions, I'm thinking there might have been a few people, and open to conjecture, that are going, hey, maybe this guy's going to have his day. They say every dog has his day. Bullshit. Every dog don't have his day. Sometimes a dog just gets run over, by a truck. That's his day. That's it. He doesn't have a beautiful day. So, I'm thinking a few fans may have gotten in my back pocket that, hey, maybe this guy's going to get his due one time. But it wasn't that good versus evil. I don't think anybody thought we were going to go out there and try to cripple each other. And I think if you take out that part of it, how bad is this going to get? Somebody going to get hurt out there? Somebody going to go too far? Is somebody intentionally going to go too far? If you take that element out of our business, then it just almost becomes like an amateur contest.
Right.
And you know what I mean? And so I don't think that was ever there as far as the audience went. So did it have the elements to be the most it could be as far as drawing money? No. That's because our relationship kind of worked against it.
Well, let's talk about the pay-per-view. Of course, we're talking about Fall Brawl 95. It goes down September 17th in Asheville, North Carolina. Most definitely Horsemen country. Lots of fans in that area. Really looking forward to that match. But probably nobody more than you, because you've acknowledged that you had so much admiration for Rick as a performer and one of the best ever, and you're a fan of Rick's, and you've seen him develop this reputation with everybody else as being one of the greatest ever, and now instead of working with him, you're working against him. What sort of pressure does that create for you?
It was a two-headed monster. On one side, I did get to be involved in a top flight, top shelf singles match, which was not my forte usually. I was usually in a different role, either in a tag match or a supporting role. So it was going to be featured. But in the back of my head, I was a little intimidated to be working with Rick. Number one, I have no babyface skills. Make that clear. No drop kicks, nothing off the top, nothing flashy. I brought nothing to the table in that respect. That was not my style, nor would I have switched my style, to be honest with you, that much for that particular night, because I still think there really wasn't a good guy and a bad guy. It was two brothers fighting, and some people wanted to see it and some people didn't. Some people wanted to look, and some were looking with one eye and one eye closed. But it was just all the hype that was around it made it special, but it made me a nervous wreck. And again, in those days, you didn't sit down and talk about a bunch of stuff. This was going to be a go out there and let's feel it out and let's run with it. And we know how much time we have approximately, and we're just going to go have a fight and see how it turns out.
You know, in those days, as you said, you wouldn't necessarily lay out the entire match, but did you already have, and you knew the amount of time you had, but did you have the finishing sequence in mind, or would you talk through any major, you know, sort of plot points in the story of the match or anything like that, or just number of minutes and we know Ric's going over, let's go figure it out or whatever?
Yeah, we knew the finish, and we knew that would get heat, you know, especially if we could make that contest, if we could suck them in enough to get involved in the match to where maybe deep enough into it, 20 minutes or so into the match, people don't know necessarily that it's going to be the figure four. You know, I think that was a gimme going into the match in most people's minds. But if we could paint a picture that I had a chance before Brian came down and did the screw job, then, you know, it would have been intriguing. And the fact that, you know, Eric or whoever made the call to allow us to have the talent, which I'm sure was a pain in their ass, sit out in the crowd was like that's something had never been done. To have the actual talent concerned or at least interested, in the very least, what would happen if these two guys got in a fight, you know? And having them sitting in the crowd and playing off of their reactions made it, in my mind, special, made it different.
It was different, and it was a very cool presentation. And on the way here, you guys are going to do a couple of promos, and we're going to play both of those. But in Ric's promo, he says something like, "AA, so many people in life never have an opportunity to stand next to greatness, to be around greatness, much less touch greatness. And tonight, my friend, you're going to face greatness." And then Mean Gene asks if he hates you, and Ric says the problem is I love him, but I love him so much that tonight I got to show him why he's going to have to explain to his little boy, or I'm going to have to explain to mine, that there's only one king of the hill, and in Nashville or Asheville, North Carolina, it's the Nature Boy. So a pretty cool promo where he starts off, you know, holding up the four fingers, showing the four horsemen sign, and then later we see a package that sort of chronicled the split between you two, and we'll play that here on the show. But then we get to your promo. In this era, I don't think you were given a script and expected to memorize it and say it word for word. How did you put together this promo to the best of your recollection?
Well, number one, Ric's promo was 100% dead on. That's what the story was. And on a shoot, very few people in this industry ever get to be in the top match on a pay-per-view in an angle with your best friend with all of the other talent sitting out in the crowd. 100%. I was going to get to touch greatness. Now, if Sting was in that role and all that set up where the whole thing was the same, or Ricky Steamboat, or anybody you'd want to name, Ricky Morton, Hulk Hogan, any of those guys, Randy Savage, you name it, if they would have been in the ring with Ric, it would have looked like business as usual. This is a big match. This is huge. But for me to have been in that situation, he was right. He was going to spank me in front of the world because that's what he felt I needed. I, in turn, felt like, you know, I always thought I had your respect, always felt like I did. But since apparently I don't, tomorrow morning you're going to wake up and you're going to respect me, and I'm going to respect myself. And that was the crux of the two interviews.
Mean Gene Okerlund right now is standing by with a man who's just about set to go with the match of his life. We're talking about the enforcer, Arn Anderson. Gene, take it away.
All right, Tony, I apologize. I didn't realize we're going to be a mile and a half run. I felt like Roger Bannister coming up from that. Arn Anderson, come on in. Before I talk to you regarding your matchup with Ric Flair, I want you to take a look at some of the history between the two of you that has taken place. Let's go.
Family ties have been severed between Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, and there is no turning back. Arn had done his best to help Ric Flair continue to hang on, As Ric Flair hides behind the enforcer, fans could sense that there were problems in the Horsemen stable. The first time given. This time was not forgotten. Vader felt the pain. He used the turmoil between these two and capitalized on it. It was quite obvious that the problems were more than just a family tiff. Something was wrong.
Now, Rick, I know we didn't leave the match the way we wanted to. There's nobody to blame here.
Was it all okay between Double A and Ric Flair? Ric Flair looked as if he was taking advantage of a good situation as he left Double A in the ring the majority of the time. Has Ric Flair lost his drive? Since Hulk Hogan has arrived, Flair has not been the competitor of old. His obsession to be #1 has caused problems in the home front and alienated him from his friends. And now, Ric Flair has been pushed harder than ever to prove himself a champion. When Rick faced Alex Wright, it was apparent that Double A wanted Flair to show that he had the drive to excel. The flamboyant Nature Boy then ran off at the mouth. Arn let out his frustration in a candid interview.
Got everything in the world. You should be floating on cloud 9. I don't know what's wrong with it.
Fans deserve to hear more. Arn's wife let the cameras into their home. Arn's explosion continued on. Soon after, fans walked up to an unexpected locker room shouting match.
He's got a match, all right. It's not out there. Let me explain something. Flair just went out the back door. He's left me again. Double A, I think you know what you are. That's why you're in the ring with me at Fall Brawl. What I got to do to you, pal, is prove why I've been where I've been for a lifetime. Woo!
There is no longer time for understanding. Families often hurt the ones they love most. This time, there's no way to patch things up. The family feud you never thought you'd see has come to a reality. Ric Flair and Arn Anderson on opposing sides, riding in different directions, but colliding on the same course at Fall Brawl.
Gene Oakland, whether you hate me, whether you love me, whether you respect me or you don't respect me, the one thing I've always given everybody is I've always called a spade a spade. I've either loved with a passion or I've hated with a passion and with a vengeance. And everybody has had a family member at one time or the other that was messing up. And you had to grab them and you had to shake them because words no longer mattered. Well, Ric Flair, I've been back here. My stomach has been in knots. My heart's been pounding out of my chest, and I wouldn't be telling the truth if I didn't tell you I'm a nervous wreck because I got to trade fists with somebody that I love more than God itself. You understand? You've been a brother to me when I didn't have one. Now I got to go trade fists with you. But it's something that's got to happen because when I get up in the morning and look in that mirror, I got to answer to me. And if you don't stand up in this world, all a man can do is stand up and live by his word, right or wrong. Tonight, I give Asheville, I give the world, and I give you, Ric Flair, my word on this. I'm going to give you all I got as a man, and win, lose, or draw. Trust me, I'm going to respect myself in the morning, and you're going to respect me.
All right, the man is headed to the ring. I'd asked Ric Flair earlier if he loved or hated Arn Anderson. Yes, he loved him, and he loved him for many years, but apparently both of these men have to meet tonight in what I suspect is going to be a classic match. Everywhere I have gone, people are abuzz about this one. Tony Schiavone, I'd like an assessment from you and Bobby the Brain Heenan. What do you think?
Well, Gene, first of all, let me say it was in the mid-1980s when professional wrestling saw its boom. It went worldwide. Packed arenas, jam-packed arenas all across the country. Many, many weeks, this arena, the Asheville Civic Center, was jam-packed with the likes of the Nature Boy Ric Flair and Arn Anderson. They were always on the same team. The fans here love both men. They've hated both men, but they've respected both men. Now, for the first time ever, they will see these two classic wrestlers go at it one-on-one.
It's very simple. It's like that old saying goes. Tonight, you either wrestle
or get off the mat.
Arn Anderson said he was nervous. We are all nervous right now. As we go to David Pinter, the match we'd never thought we'd see.
Really, really good stuff. And we've got both of those here on the show. Do you, in this era, pre-tape these early in the afternoon, or when would you have laid this promo down, and who would have been the producers in the room? Or just talk us through that process here at 95.
It was live, and they trusted me to do it live, and I was heading to the ring right from there, and my nerves were shot. My stomach was churning. Matter of fact, which I've never done before, I've seen done by a lot of guys, you know, in this business. When you walk through that curtain, it's just you, or it's the partners that you have with you. But if it's just you, you walk through that curtain, it's you against the audience and your dance partner. It's up to you to go out and tell a story. I puked in a trash can on the way. I've never done that before, never done it since. And it was just because of the hugeness of when I going through the curtain this time. It was like a different point in my career. It was a standalone point. It might not ever be that big again, with all the trappings and all the story surrounded around it and all the other talent pitching in to make it as big as what it was going to be, and to have an angle on the end of it, and me to actually come out of this thing winning. That's a little bit for one guy that's been a second fiddle his whole career to swallow, and I got no problem saying it. So I gave it a good puke. Wish I could have had time to brush my teeth, but hey, that's Ric's problem. So that's the way it was. Nobody gave me a script. Nobody told me what to say. It was entirely all mine. And it's, you know what? I don't remember in the history of my career anyone ever saying to me, here's what you got to say. Now, there's been, here's how long you have. You got 3:30. We're talking about Richmond, or we're talking about Greensboro. Here's your opponents. Fill in the blanks. And that's it. That's how you learn how to do promos, because they become an extension of who you are. Just going out there and like you've crammed for a test and memorizing a full page of verbiage and delivering it. Well, okay, I got all the words you wanted out, but I had no emotion behind it. Nobody believed that that was coming out of me, and it's pretty easy to spot when it's not coming out of a person. If you cram for a test, it's gone tomorrow, and that's why in today's world, not a lot of guys are great promo guys, because they're not having an opportunity to learn.
Well, you guys are masters on the mic, both you and Ric, and these are two very, very memorable promos. But now it's time for the match. When you come through the curtain, fresh after having had an upset stomach and tossed your cookies a little bit, does that settle you down? Do you feel like once you got that out of your system, you were okay? When you walk in front of the crowd, is it like riding a bicycle again, or are you still nervous on your way to the ring?
A little nervous till he chopped me the first time. And that woke me up. That put me back in fight mode. And it got my thinking straightened out. And we went from there. It was just instinct, and you go to grab a hold and I'll counter it, and I'll try to grab a hold and you counter it, and we'll do some fighting in the middle, and we'll see where it goes.
Talk to me a little bit about the crowd that night. It's in Asheville. Do you have any friends or family in the crowd to come out and watch?
No, sir. Did not. It was just Ric and I and the audience.
You guys go 22 minutes and 37 seconds. Meltzer would write, most of the underneath wrestlers were sitting together, faces and heels, or at least kept separate, watching this, trying to get over the importance of the match. The psychology was excellent. They did a lot of the normal Flair or Anderson routine with slight cross-ups, as in getting the story that they each knew each other's moves, but the other was one step ahead recognizing it. And it turned into a very good match with near falls going back and forth. Neither really came across as a face or a heel. Anderson was selling his knee big from long figure 4 sequences. When Pillman came to ringside, Pillman punches Flair, who punches him back, and as Flair turns his back, Pillman gives him an enziguri with a cowboy boot to set up their Nitro match the next night, and a staggered Flair falls into Arn Anderson's DDT for the pin. 3.5 stars. So pretty good review here. Lots of storytelling. Maybe not exactly what fans would have hoped for, in that there is a little bit of outside interference, but that's standard Horseman fare at the time, so it does keep that story alive. Tell me a little bit about when you knew you were going to win and what the finish was, and were you yourself sort of shocked that I'm about to beat Ric Flair on pay-per-view here?
Well, it was shocking, and when I did hear what we were going to do, I looked at that and I went, okay, let's turn this around. Let's just say if Pillman came down and he screwed me on behalf of Rick to gain some favor because he was the lead horseman and he wanted in, that would have made sense. So us going this route and reversing it and him helping me win would have made sense. And if you're the guy that's getting screwed, being the fact that we made no bones about it, there was always 3 or 4 or 5 of us on a guy, and, we would gang up on a guy. That way we were sure of not getting hurt. If you can cream a guy without getting hurt, you got no risk. That's a pretty good proposition. So from a storytelling aspect, it absolutely worked. Now, there might have been some folks that were disappointed that it wasn't a clean finish, but I don't think a clean finish would have helped anybody. I don't think if I just made a comeback and DDT'd Ric Flair, anybody would have swallowed it. Probably not. So I think it worked in that respect. And if you're the outside guy looking in, that's how the Horsemen would have did it. If is 4 stars the top rating for Meltzer?
5.
5. Okay. I was hoping he didn't give us that close to the top score, because my lack of skills, I'm sure, made that a lot less exciting than it should have been. And trust me, I've always been the first one to say, I don't do much. I can't do much. I just try to make the few things that I do, I try to do them well, and I try to put them in a spot where they're impactful. And but as far as being a flashy performer, certainly with Rick doing the upside down bump and the strut and all his stuff that he does, I am in no way, shape, or form an opponent for him in that department. So I'm glad that it was 3.5. If 5 is the top, I'm still very flattered that I got that kind of rating. Thank you, Meltzer. Appreciate it. And that's that.
Tell me about the way the match was received afterwards. When you hear the bell, you come back through the curtain. Did it live up to your expectations? Was Rick happy? What do you remember about post-match?
Yeah, I think everybody was happy with it. It was a surprise ending. I don't think anybody in the building saw that coming, and it still had a little bit of a screw job. Well, it had a lot of a screw job to it, so it didn't hurt Rick in any fashion. And the fact that I could claim, even if there would have been a stack of pianos fell out of the ceiling on top of Rick, for me to be able to cover him and get the win, that's one of the things you can hang your hat on for the rest of your career. 10 years from then, you would look in the record books and you would go, okay, Arn Anderson wins over Ric Flair. They're not going to have that 10 pianos fell out of the top of the ceiling and that was the circumstances around it. And it's something as a heel, you would go back to and bring it up 10 years later. It's like beating Hulk Hogan twice. 2 weeks in a row. It doesn't matter that you shot him with a spear gun and backed over him with a dump truck and took out a chainsaw and cut off 2 of his ankles where he couldn't stand up, and then threw some powder in his face and covered it. 1, 2, 3. The fact that you had beaten him twice in a row as a heel if you really are a heel and you're not trying to be cool and you're not trying to get over like a babyface would, you would hang your hat on that. And that's what I did with Rick, and that helped our story.
Of course, because there was some interference with Brian Pillman, Rick's going to demand a rematch, and that goes down on October 2nd on Nitro. Rick would pick up a win here by DQ, and once again, Brian Pillman interferes. So there's a solution to that, and that's sort of an old school one. The following week, there's going to be a cage match. So on October 9th, it's you and Ric Flair inside of a steel cage. Did you know, the story all along was we're going to do like a trilogy of matches, or in this more modern Nitro era, are you writing things sort of on the fly? Or did you know the storyline before you ever got to Fall Brawl? We're going to do 3 matches. Last one's going to be in a steel cage. Then we're going to do the mixed tag at Halloween Havoc, and we're off to the races.
Well, I think, probably Eric and Kevin and Rick even maybe had some ideas in their head. I wasn't privy to everything that everybody was thinking, but I think they were probably, in those days, we would see how something got over. You did have a week then to figure out what the next piece was. Okay, did that get over? Now what do we do the third week? And, with live television, you have that option of changing it, going to the ring. It's whatever works, whatever helps your story. I wasn't real clear on where we were going to go. We were just kind of feeling it out and seeing what got over and what didn't.
Let's talk a little bit about, the cage match that happens on Nitro. You get another win. This makes 2 wins over Rick for you. His 1 win is by DQ. Was Rick adamant that since he was sort of the tippy-top guy that he helped, quote-unquote, put you over here? Or how do you remember, these finishes being discussed? Or was there even a discussion?
I'm sure he was on board with it because Rick, more than anybody else, knew that the one thing that has always been true in this business is you got to get one guy over. And when that guy is truly over, he can reach down and grab a guy that's below him on the ladder and pull him up a rung or 2. And Rick knew by putting me over, no matter what the circumstances, not once, but twice, would just, if we were going to get back together anyway, would just make me a more viable entity going forward, a bigger star, if that's the right terminology, at least a better opponent for whoever it may be going forward, to be able to say that I beat Ric Flair twice. And he was certainly on board. He knew that, this is a win over however many times he was champion at the time, which is huge. The fact of the matter is it just helped my career at that point. And I'm a debt of gratitude for that.
Tell me about your nerves going into match 2 and 3. You've told us, how crazy it was to the point that you threw up on your way to the ring at Fall Brawl. But the Nitro audience is much bigger than the pay-per-view audience. Certainly in that era, pay-per-view was a big deal. It was presented as a big deal, but certainly more eyeballs on Nitro. I got to wonder, does this get better or worse when now you're going to win again, and this time you're going to do it in front of many more people, and it's inside of a steel cage?
Winning or losing for a guy, that has never won a match, which would be me, is not that big a concern. It only is when it is career altering or angle altering or giving your company a slight edge in the momentum for the war that you're in that particular night. If in fact you are in a war at that point, it's just, it's all relative. Here's the fact. if this were all 100% legitimate, Haku would be the world champion, and he would have no challengers. To this day, he would be the world champion, and there would be an empty locker room because nobody would challenge him. So it wasn't the winning or losing, wasn't anything about that. It was just, how's this going to help our story? How's this going to help us moving ahead? And I tell you, I'd lost all of my nerves by that point. It was just getting, you could be partners with a guy, 2,000 times, and that might have been the case at this point. Who knows? But there's a big difference, and now you're on the other side of the ball and you're wrestling him. It's totally, totally different. It's a different animal altogether.
Well, of course, on the way here, it's apparent that, or as we're leaving these matches, Rick is outnumbered. You've got Brian Pillman in your corner. He needs somebody to be in his corner. And we see Rick consistently start begging Sting to be his partner and have his back against you and Brian Pillman. And, of course, many times Sting refuses. And finally, he agrees to help Rick. And he's got an interesting moment when this happens because Rick has a bunch of kids in the ring with him. And he's trying to sort of appeal to Sting's little stingers. And Sting agrees to be Rick's partner, but says, hey, if you betray me again, I'll leave you for dead. So, of course, we know what that means.
Absolutely no. Bottom line, period.
You want to tell me no? Well, we'll accept that right now. But why don't you watch this for the next minute? Send him out, please. Send him out. Send him out. Come here. Come here. Come on, kids. Come on. Come here. No. Puts a different light on, doesn't it? Puts a different light on it, doesn't it? Come on in here, kiddos. Hey, let me ask you kids something. Is the Stinger the greatest thing going today?
Yeah! And let me tell you something. I live and breathe these little stingers right here every day of my life. And if I thought for 1 second that you, a man that has kids of your own, right? You would use these kids, especially the stingers out there, your kids, to something out of me. If I thought for 1 second you were going to use them, Flair, let me tell you something. Reluctantly, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt this one time. One time only. But if you swerve me in the slightest little bit, sometime down the line, Halloween Havoc for starters, wait a minute, I'm gonna leave you for dead. Dead.
Halloween Havoc 95, Sting and Ric Flair in one corner, Arn Anderson and Brian Pillman in the other. The match goes around 17 minutes. They're telling a great story here where Sting is in trouble. He desperately needs to make the hot tag to Ric Flair. As soon as he does, of course, Rick immediately turns on him, and now it's 3-on-1. And we announce that the four horsemen are back together. Meltzer would say, the match had the most heat on the card, and the angle was very well done. Flair suffered a rotator cuff earlier in the week, and wouldn't have been able to work anywhere near 100% if they had decided to book the thing differently coming out of the Nitro match. But then again, this is probably how it was booked all along. 3 3/4 stars. We know that Rick is eventually going to have rotator cuff surgery, and I think even to this day it's still a little wonky for him. Was this, as far as you know, always the creative to just get to Halloween Havoc and then have Rick turn on Sting, or had he not been injured, do you think that could have been worked a little differently?
No, I think the timing was okay. Using kids, to sucker Sting in and kind of put him on the spot, that's a pretty shitty thing to do. As I'm sitting here picturing in my head, I love it all over again. It's a pretty rotten thing to do. And you put Sting on the spot, he about has to say yeah. So, and in those days, nothing we would have done would have been to tarnish Sting's star whatsoever. He was the flagship of the company. He was the guy. You know, he was the one that everyone could believe and trust, and they did. And for him to do the right thing at that particular point in time, I think if he would have continued to say no, you know, in the role that Rick was in or that he was playing at that particular time, that he had had a change of heart, it would have probably turned the audience on Sting. So him doing the right thing worked. I think all the pieces were in place. And when Rick turned around and turned it on him, it was like nobody saw it coming. I don't think at that particular point, if they did, there wasn't many of them because they really got with the heat. And it's one of those times where they were really pissed at the three of us.
Right now, let's go to Tony Schiavone. All right, thanks a lot, Eric. Last night at Halloween Havoc, some incredible things happened. And still to come in this telecast, fans, the footage is on its way. We will show you what happened, so stay right with us. But thanks to our friends at WCW Magazine, we did get some pictures of what happened last night as it relates to the Nature Boy Ric Flair and his match as he was partners with Sting against Arn Anderson and Flying Brian. Let's take a look at what we saw last night. Arn Anderson and Flying Brian, it was reported earlier that they had attacked the Nature Boy Ric Flair and he was injured, and we were not sure as to if he would wrestle or not. Therefore, Sting had to come to the ring by himself. And what a match it was. It was basically a one-on-two. One-on-two, Ric Flair was not anywhere to be found. Then Ric Flair made his appearance. His forehead was taped. He ran into the ring, and he was waiting on Sting. As a matter of fact, he was encouraging Sting, it seemed, to make the tag. And then Sting finally did make the tag. Once he made the tag, as you see right here, brutally attacked not only by Arn Anderson and Flying Brian, but by the Nature Boy Ric Flair as well. As a matter of fact, they were holding Sting for Flair to win as well. It was obvious then, as Flair peeled the tape from his forehead, that it was an entire farce. And at the end, of course, three men were really whooping it up. And with that in mind, let's bring my guest at this time, right here to Dayton, Ohio live, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, Flying Brian, and Arn Anderson. Saturday on WCW Saturday Night, I never thought I'd be standing in the ring talking to you three, but as we saw, it all happened to Sting just last night.
It was a thing of beauty, Tony. The Stinger, he fought for his life. He gave everything he had, and then he hit Slick Rick with the tag. Nature Boy came in, styling and profiling, and then he cut Sting's throat. The carnage that ensued has brought us one step closer to this, the symbol of excellence. Some people call us a gang. Some people call us a militia. We call it a dynasty. The greatest team on the face of God's green earth.
Tony Schiavone, for 2 years now, everywhere I've gone, everybody's asked me the same thing. When are you going to put this back together? And I told them, be careful what you wish for. You just may get it. Now, Sting, do not hold your head down in shame. You did the impossible. You were more man than we ever believed. You fought two of the Horsemen for 10 minutes. But pure mathematics and the law of physics will tell you it can't be done. So we all find ourselves today with our hand going into that familiar cramp. There's now 3, soon there'll be 4, and you know what that means. Tell them, Nate.
And brother, does it ever feel good?
Oh my, he is pond scum. Crying out loud.
Somebody go get me a bag. I want to vomit.
Guess what? Guess what? We're back. We're back. And whether you like it or you don't like it, learn, by God, to love it, because it's the best thing going today. Sting, you're like a lot of women we deal with every day. We're going to tell you what you want to hear. We're going to do what we want to do. And if you don't like it, if your friends don't like it, next Monday night on Nitro, the Horsemen will be in town, ready to go to work. Woo!
And we'll have more after this on Nitro.
Oh, my God.
Were you excited at sort of the reformation of the Horsemen here? It had been dormant for a little while. You know, you guys had tried sort of start and stop before, and there'd been some different ideas along the way with Paul Roma and whatnot, and we'll talk about that another time, I'm sure. But we're going to see a new Four Horsemen form here. Of course, it's already established that you, Brian Pillman, and Ric Flair are here, but the addition of Chris Benoit is going to be a big one. And I'm sure there's lots of Benoit discussion to be had in the future, but when you hear that the creative is going to be, we're putting the Horsemen back together, are you excited? Are you regretful? Or do you wish that, you know, we would just leave well enough alone? Because I know that these later versions of the Horsemen maybe weren't nearly as revered as the original version, but that's probably true with, you know, movies or books or anything like that, where people say, well, the original was the best one. Where were you with the concept of the Horsemen coming back in late 95?
Well, I've said on record many times, you know, the first version of the Horsemen, which included Ole, was special. It absolutely worked. It was absolutely credible. Ole Anderson was a credit as a Horseman. He was something that I can say, hey, when people say, who were the original Four Horsemen? And I throw Ole's name out there, it's with a lot of pride and respect that I do. I owe him a lot as far as teaching me, you know, how to get around that ring in a credible way and do some things that people are going to buy. I also think that as far as producing a match and getting the most out of your opponents / dance partners, Barry Windham was a credible selection as a Horseman. And I think that was probably at that point in time the hottest angle, the hottest time the Horsemen were, because Barry could just flat shit and get it. There ain't anything Barry Windham couldn't do in that ring. But now, skipping ahead to the point in time we're talking about, Chris Benoit is one of those guys. He's like Ole Anderson in one respect, that when he steps through the ropes, you believe everything he does. And when he steps out on the ropes, you kind of take a breath and went, Jesus, thank God he didn't kill anybody in there. Very, very solid, incredible, plausible, believable performer. And the excitement of having him as a partner, yeah, it thrilled the piss out of me.
Yeah, obviously Brian Pillman, well established to this WCW audience. At this point, though, Chris Benoit had only been in the company for a brief amount of time and wasn't very well established, but sort of being introduced as a Horseman makes him a made man. Over the next few months, though, we're going to see Brian Pillman start to get more and more out of control on TV. He's honing in on his loose cannon persona. And there's a few times on Nitro where you would yell at him during promos and even slap him. What did you think of the loose cannon persona and all that was going on with Pillman in late 95, early 96?
What do you mean persona? You're telling me that wasn't Brian Pillman? Well, you know what? If that wasn't him, because as he slowly started to get unhinged and it started to escalate, the lines between reality and character development were pretty blurred. Now, Brian Pillman was an intelligent, articulate guy. If you were going to sit down and talk to him about sports or current events or, the business itself, whatever it was, he was very, very smart guy. Great athlete to have played pro football and been on the Suicide Squad, which, as we know, is kickoffs, which is dangerous. You either get killed or kill somebody. Probably, I would say he probably weighed around 200 pounds to do that. Makes him a supreme athlete as well. But the loose cannon thing, I mean, he had it down so well. I wondered sometimes, is this guy working me? Is he working us? Or is he really about half nuts? And to this day, I don't know. Who knows? Probably God's the only one knows the truth of the matter. But, man, he sure convinced me.
Well, you convinced us all in this Fall Brawl 95 match. Really is what we were talking about, but we managed to talk about all three matches. Of the three matches you had with Rick, the one on pay-per-view and the two on Nitro, does one stand out above the others?
Just the first one, probably, because it is the first. No matter what your first is, whether it's your first girlfriend or your first partner, your first championship, whatever the case may be, firsts never get topped because they're always going to be first. And that first match, once I got the jitters out of me, as it turned out, the story and the things that were to follow, and Rick put me over, which is a huge honor for me. I'm not lost on that fact. It just turned out that was a special night, and the other two, not to say that they weren't, but it was just more business and us building on that first match, which I think was special.
That first match, Fall Brawl 95, where would it fall as far as importance from your perspective to your career?
I don't think it was one of my better performances because I was miscast and I was trying to play the straight man and be a little bit of a baby face, and I wasn't me. I wasn't out there trying to get somebody's eyeball out on their cheek or break their leg or whatever the case may be, DDT them on a chair, which was my normal frame of mind. Once you step outside of that scenario, I think my worth would have been a lot less in that particular match, which brought the performance down. I don't think it compares, and these are just personal favorites, the first War Games, or you could probably go through the War Games list and find a couple or three that were more brutal and more violent than the others. But certainly the first one was incredible. Bobby Eaton and I wrestled Ricky Steamboat and Dustin Rhodes in the Omni. We went 59 minutes and had a finish. I thought that was pretty special. That's not televised anywhere. I think when Ricky Steamboat came back in Savannah, Georgia, to be partners with Dustin against Larry Zbyszko and I, that was a special night. But those kind of stand out more so than this one on as far as best matches, best performances on my part, most emotional, maybe you get the vote with the Rick match, but those other matches, I think I was better at being me.
Well, we appreciate you being you this week again, and we're looking forward to next week. Tell your friends to come find Arn. Just search for Arn, A-R-N, anywhere you enjoy podcasts. And go ahead and throw us a follow on social media, because next week it's all about you, the listener. Our episode will be hashtag Ask Arn Anything. And the way to participate in the show is simple. Go throw us a follow at The Arn Show on Twitter. And when you do so, you'll see pinned to the top us asking for your questions. Reply to that thread and listen for your question next week here on The Arn Show. It comes out Tuesday, 6 a.m., anywhere you enjoy podcasts, and brought to you exclusively by Westwood One. It's Arn, and we'll see you next Tuesday right here on Westwood One.